Undertale, a simple RPG where you choose who lives and who dies. A game where your choice matters and decides your fate. Deltarune, an RPG not unlike Undertale, where your choice
actually has no bearing whatsoever. Let's talk about that on this episode of I.O. Chat. Undertale was developed by Toby Fox and released on September 15th, 2015. Throughout the course of a few years, it gained a massive following. From fan art to fanfiction to the greatest of fan projects, Undertale became one of the greatest indie games of this generation. But how did it become this popular? My theory is the massive amount of, theories that surround the game. From who Sans and Papyrus really were, to the origin of timelines and the power of determination. But the one that is more famous than the rest is the existence of the character W.D. Gaster. W.D. Gaster, or Gaster for short, is a character that is, literally and figuratively speaking, scattered across time and space. If you've only heard of Undertale, or only heard of somebody talk about it, even if you've played the game yourself, you may not know who Gaster is. Although, to your credit, neither do we. Most people know about the characters Sans, Papyrus, Toriel, Asgore, Alphys, Undyne. You might even remember the likes of Metaton, Nabsabluk, or Grilby. But Gaster is someone whom few people know about, and even fewer have experienced. Doing the math, only 1 in 1,000 of people who have ever played Undertale have seen him in the flesh. This is due to the game's fun value, an arbitrary number from 1 to 100 that the game randomly sets at the beginning to let certain things happen during your game. Sometimes you'll hear a wrong number song, or hear Sans tell you a refrigerator joke over the phone. For the lucky few that do manage to see him, his presence is, even then, fleeting. In a seemingly random hallway after the waterfall section, a gray door appears. Upon entering it, you'll see this. A lone sprite, seemingly being Gaster. And once you interact with him, poof! He is gone. This simple interaction, along with some other interesting findings such as the Gaster followers and entry number 17, led to people asking questions that, for many of them, were never answered. I could go on about the many theories people have about the game, but for now, let's stop talking about those theories and start talking about the game. It is still a remarkable game to this day, with its lovable characters and breakthrough game mechanics, the biggest of which is the ability to spare or to show mercy to your enemies. The game, from the very beginning, tells you that you do not have to kill anyone. Toriel, the game's take and intentionally punny tutorial character, tells you not to fight, but rather to strike up a friendly conversation. She even gives you ideas for conversation topics if you go up to her and ask. This is the game's first indicator that your choices matter. Every decision that you make could have an impact on the ending of the story. The game even changes your character's behavior based on what you do. For instance, if you decide not to hurt anybody and go the pacifist route, then the game rewards you by allowing more story quests with characters, getting to see into their personal lives. Cooking spaghetti with Undyne is some of the most hilarious interactions I've seen with 2D sprites, and the relationship between Alphys and Undyne is adorable. On the flip side, if you decide that you're going to kill everyone, the game throws everything it can at you. Sure, the battles are easy at first. You one-shot kill Toriel, and everyone else seems like a walk in the park. But once you get to Undyne's fight, this is where the true battle begins. Undyne kind of becomes the game's protagonist, saying lines like, "I can feel everyone's energy flowing through me." She becomes one of the hardest battles in the entire game. I say that because the hardest battle isn't actually the final boss. It is Sans. Yes, this is something that I know that everybody and their uncle knows about. I even knew about it before I ever played Undertale. But it's still important to point out. The one character that you don't really pay much attention to, other than funny interactions and a hint at something more, he is the one who is the hardest to beat. I don't know, I just find it interesting, and after that point, you don't even hardly fight Asgore. You straight up murder him. The point is, Undertale really gives you this sense of choice, and it encourages you to do as you please. This, my friends, is where Deltarune comes in. Deltarune is the spiritual successor to Undertale. As it's also made by Toby Fox, people expected it to be the new masterpiece. Yet another wonder created by Toby Fox. But Toby said something very interesting in an interview. Quote, "If you played Undertale, I don't think I can make anything that makes you feel that way again. However, it's possible I can make something else." I really appreciate this as an aspiring designer, because after you create the best thing ever, what do you say about your next product? You say that it's not the same. It's something entirely different. In a way, you don't move vertically in quality, you move horizontally. You make something different. Anyway, let's talk about Deltarune. A quick disclaimer before we go forwards. The full game of Deltarune is not out, and the vision and overall themes of the game may change between now and its release. What I will be talking about is purely the free demo Toby put out on Halloween of 2018. With that being said, let's get to it. Deltarune, from the very beginning, is familiar. Toriel wakes you up and tells you to get ready for school. You drive through the town and go to school, where you meet interesting characters like Alphys? Eventually, you meet the character Susie, whom you take into a closet, fall into darkness, and go on this wild adventure with wacky characters, a surprisingly touching story, and a final boss at the end with you walking off into the distance to appear right where you started, in the closet. Cards, checkers, puzzle pieces, even a stuffed cat. You go back home, and the day ends. This is all well and good, but already you can see some of the parallels. Let me put it this way. You, a human, falls down a dark pit into a strange land filled with mysterious and sometimes friendly characters. Some are wacky, others are less friendly, but they all point you towards your main goal of beating the big bad guy at the top. Before you leave, you get to say goodbye to everyone, and then you end the day by looking into the sunset and...
Oh my goodness!
Okay, so, as you can see, not everything is the same. Actually, there are quite a few differences, not only to the story, but to the game mechanics as well. In Undertale, you fight by yourself, and you avoid attacks by moving your heart out of the way. In Deltarune, you have a party, but you still avoid attacks by moving your heart out of the way. In Undertale, you meet Papyrus, a character who believes he is greater than he actually is, and aspires to be on the Royal Guard. In Deltarune, you meet Lancer, a character who believes he's greater than he actually is, but is forced to do his father's bidding as the prince of the realm. As you can see, although Deltarune is definitely a different game, it's all very familiar. And I believe this is for two very important reasons. Number one, it's easier for Toby Fox to create something that he has already had experience with. This isn't to say that he's being lazy. On the contrary, having a system be so familiar to the developer allows them to exploit and improve upon that system. It also allows Toby to focus more upon other aspects of the game, such as refining the gameplay or working on the story. Number two, it creates a very interesting experience for the player. Having this all be so familiar forces the player to see what's different, as well as what's the same. When a player sees something familiar in this way, they think, "Hey, I remember that! That was awesome!" Then, when they see how different it is, it doesn't detract from the experience. In fact, it improves upon it. It's the same reason you can play a million different platformers, such as Mario, Cave Story, or Celeste, and still have an amazing time playing with them. It's not only because you appreciate what's the same, you also appreciate what's different. The game even recognizes this fact in the title of the game itself, Deltarune, being an anagram of Undertale. It's the same, but different. In that way, let's talk about the biggest difference between Undertale and Deltarune, and that's the player's sense of choice. As I mentioned before, one of Undertale's biggest draws is its sense of choice. You get to decide who you spare and who you kill. And depending on what you do can lead to a happy ending where you fix all the problems in the world, or destroy it entirely. In Deltarune, your sense of choice is both surprisingly and intentionally taken away. And it's not in the way that you'd think. It's not that you don't have a choice, it's that your choice doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you try to save everyone or kill everyone. The game always ends the same way. You always defeat the boss at the end, you always say goodbye to everyone, and you always come back home with a tug on your heart. Right before it's ripped out and thrown into a cage and... Anyway, you get the point. Your choices don't matter. This is immediately emphasized at the beginning of the game, when a strange voice tells you to make a vessel for your soul. You give it a look, personality traits, and a name. Then the game immediately scraps all of that, telling you, as if to throw it at your face, that you don't have a choice in this world. You wake up with the same name as always, Chris, which is another reference to a character you play in Undertale, Frisk. This all conveys this weird sense of inevitability to the player, which is quite odd considering the tone of the game. The whole time you're on this quest to save the world by restoring balance to the light and dark. You struggle as you figure out every puzzle, fight every battle, trek every area. But it always ends the same, with you going home, saying goodnight to your mother, and, this. It's all very dissonant, but not a bad dissonant like random keys being played on a piano. It's more like a finely tuned minor chord. It's eerie, curious, and fascinating. It's like eating grandma's freshly baked cookies while thinking about that college exam coming up, which you definitely didn't study for. Not that that's me. I actually just finished college, but yeah, I can relate. In any case,
This next game seems very, very interesting. What do you two think?
What do you two think? What do you two think?
yeah, that's about right.
Alrighty, that's the last of the lines.
I wonder what people are going to think about that last line. I mean, like, what do you two think? I mean, come on, it's not like I actually have, like, imaginary characters or something. I mean, that's stupid. Like, everybody does that. It's not like... Oh, hello there. Wait. You seem familiar. Wait, no. Ah!